Okay. Nice. All right. Everyone can see my screen, right? We're good. Okay, sick. Okay, welcome, guys. Today we're going to be starting a portion of the front end that's a little bit different than what we're used to. I know we've been learning React and we've been typing a lot, but today we're going to be starting our UI UX journey. So essentially, Tijmen and I are going to be holding 3 lessons on UI UX design. So this basically just involves like designing interfaces and the philosophy behind doing that. And we, Tijmen and I love designing, so we're really excited to be here and to teach you guys this stuff. So yeah, like always, before we begin, we can talk about our agenda. So we're going to go through a brief introduction of UI UX, talk about the responsibilities of the designer, as well as some like career options after learning design if you're interested. And then we're going to teach you some tools. We'll be actually holding a brief Figma workshop today, just so you guys have the necessary tools to be able to actually do your homeworks and do projects and stuff. And then we'll be releasing homework. It should be pretty short too. So, yeah, and then, as always, if you guys have any any questions, make sure you leave them in the chat. Someone will respond in the chat, or just feel free to interrupt us. Typical stuff. But yeah, I'll just hand it off to Tijmen to start off our intro to UI UX.
All right, cool. Yeah. So when we talk about design, before we begin, we want to lay out some framework and definitions. So design is the study of how you can get the user what they need, what they want, and sometimes that even includes giving the user things to want. So that's, to put it very broadly, what design is. It's completely centered around the user and creating something for someone else. And design exists essentially anywhere. Any product, anything that people make, there's probably someone who designed it, and someone who, before making it real, sat back and said, okay, what do we want this thing to achieve? What do we want it to, what features do we want it to have? What kind of users are we making it for? And this can happen for anything, from physical to digital things. So like chairs, Facebook, laptops, monitors, trash cans, everything in the world around you is designed. But here at Web Development at Berkeley, we're going to focus on digital interface design, which is the intersection between graphic design, experience design, UI UX stuff, and yeah, front end. So design is a very broad topic, and it's often pretty tough to know where to start and how to start thinking about design. So when we say be observant, that means that from now on, if you are really trying to expand your design brain, it's always good to ask yourself some key questions when you are looking at anything that's been designed. So you can say, you can ask yourself, why did the designer choose to add this specific feature? Why did they choose to add this button in this specific spot? What purpose does that have for the user? And then it's also useful to consider the user of every product and how that product tends to the user. Next slide. All right, so we're going to start with a simple design example. So there's this guy, and his name is Don Norman. And people call him the father of modern design because like maybe 30 years ago, he sat down and he thought about the way that things in life are created. And he noticed that a lot of things are made, they weren't taking proper account of the user. And so a really good example that he mentions in his book, The Design of Everyday Things, is a Norman door, where he noticed that a lot of doors are just not designed properly. And he has this example where he talks about a colleague of his that got trapped inside between two sets of doors. So his colleague was entering this building, and there were two parallel lines of doors. And the doors look very clean, very aesthetic. And that meant that it essentially just looked like a frame, right? And so his colleague got stuck because they were pushing on the wrong end of the door where the hinges were. And of course, when you push on the hinge of a door, it doesn't open. So in that case, the designer of the door didn't make it obvious intuitively for the user that that is how you open the door. Because you can't tell where the hinges are if they're hidden, right? Yeah, so I guess to make it a little interactive, does anyone want to kind of volunteer to list off a few design considerations that you would have to think about when you're designing a door?
I guess where you place the door handle.
Yeah, and then do you think there always needs to be a door handle, or do you think there's other ways to indicate how to open the door?
Yeah, I guess you could have like a push-pull situation.
Mm-hmm.
You could also have like different kinds of door handles. So it's not just a knob, it's also like a handle. And then I guess the weight of the door is also something to consider because you don't want to have such a heavy door. And maybe the material of it, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like if you're designing a door for the entrance to like a bank or a business, right? Like you can get away with making that glass because you want it to seem open and inviting. But if you're designing the front door for someone's house, you might not want that to be glass because privacy is a big design factor in that door. All right, cool. We can go to the next slide. Okay, cool. So you might recognize this door. Essentially every building on Berkeley campus has this door. And that's because it's designed pretty well. It's very obvious how to open it from the inside. You just have to push on the latch. And on the outside, there's usually a door handle, which has the benefit of making it easily lockable. And this door specifically is meant to allow people to get out of the building quickly if there needs to be an evacuation. Yeah. So in short, what we can take away from this door exercise is that whenever you're designing anything for a user, whether that's physical or digital, the experience needs to be smooth and intuitive. And you want to make sure that for the user to do the thing that you want them to do, it needs to be the path of least resistance for them to do that action. So if you put that latch on the door, then the easiest thing to do is push, and then the door opens. And that's exactly what you want to happen. So yeah, that's just like a kind of a framework in your mind that you should adopt in order to be a good designer. So we can go next slide. So yeah, think about doors when you're designing things. Next slide.
Okay, so thank you, Tijmen, for talking about doors. Doors are very important, and yeah, like you said, everyday objects have very intentional designs in them, so it's cool to be on the lookout and to see how people might have created these products that you use. So yeah, so next we're going to talk about UI versus UX. So obviously this lesson is called UI UX 1. You might be wondering, like, what exactly is UI? What is UX, right? How are they different? How are they the same? So UI UX are two very different fields, but they're highly related and they often go hand in hand. But so I'll basically be outlining to you guys the differences and kind of let you guys see how design is kind of sectored off. So we can start with UI. So UI stands for user interface design. Like I said, UI is very related to UX, but it concerns the visual elements of the page. So the interface of an application is basically what the user is seeing. So for example, if you look at this Facebook screenshot, that's the homepage that I see when I open Facebook. This interface involves everything from the buttons to, you know, the photos that are on there, the different sections, and the different components, right? So basically user interface designers, what they do, or, you know, when you're designing a user interface, you're, like I said, you're interacting with the visual elements, the visual components. So for example, like the font face, right? So what font did Facebook decide to use? The color schemes, the icons and the buttons, spacing of all the elements, images that you use, animations on a page. So, you know, like if you go to a different page, like how do the elements come in? Or if you hover over something, does it change color? And then just a general layout of the page so that everything's kind of put in a logical place. So that's kind of what user interface design is. Yeah, you can look at honestly any digital interface. So like Instagram, Twitter, it doesn't have to be social media. Like honestly, anything on the web is, you know, represented as an interface. So user interface designers, this is what they interact with. And then to contrast, we have user experience designers. So this is essentially the art of designing interactions. So kind of what the name suggests, users will basically experience a certain product that you're using. And this is not just limited to digital products or applications. It also applies to anything that you can experience. So like shoes, cars, all that stuff. User experience concerns kind of, you know, as the name suggests, the experience that users have when using your platform. So that incorporates, you know, the feel and the flow of the website. On the right, we see that we have a nice user flow chart. Essentially what that shows us is kind of, you know, like what happens when a user navigates through your application. So for example, you have a new user and they, you know, user configuration is the next step. And then you move on to like user registration. And then you notice that there are like different ways that it can branch out. So this is a really good way to represent the way that your user will interact with your platform and kind of follow through it. Yeah, UX is very user-centric. So the way that you design user flow is very much targeted towards like the user that you're trying to capture. So oftentimes this involves a lot of user research and a lot of like user interviews. So, you know, taking a product and saying, you know, asking them specific questions to target the weaknesses and, you know, the strengths of a platform and its flow. And then lastly, it involves communications with the developers to make sure that everything is feasible and logical. Yeah, so that's kind of what UX is in comparison to UI. It's a lot less visual and more so relates to like the logic of the platform and everything. So yeah, I guess next we can talk about a little, you know, as they call it, a little case study. Not really a case study at all, but just a good example to kind of highlight the different aspects of design. So over the summer, I worked on a video calling project called Huddle. Essentially, it's, you know, like I said, it's video calling, but we wanted to kind of revamp it and design it in such a way that is, you know, a little bit better for social interaction. So I guess like the way that, I guess this project kind of illustrates the different types of design that you have when building an application. I just talked about UI UX design, but there's also things like, you know, brand design and product design and all that fancy stuff. So I guess we can start with brand design. So this kind of is a little bit different than designing an interface because honestly, like with our clients specifically, a lot of times they already come to us with like a certain brand that they have in mind. It depends on the project, obviously, but basically designing the brand just means, you know, like designing the logos, picking out the color schemes, the font face. Of course, it involves a lot more than that, but that's just a few of the components of it. So within the context of this project, you know, we had to figure out like how we wanted to represent our company or our project, right? So down here, we have a quote pulled straight from the Figma that I was working on. And it just talks about the kind of like the vibes that we wanted our brand or our company to give off. So you can kind of just look at what we wrote. It's not super formal, but it kind of highlights the way that we wanted to portray our product. So yeah, these 3 photos are just examples of some of the like ideas that we came up with. I think we ended up using the one on the left. But yeah, that is brand design. And then, like I talked about earlier, we have user interface design. So this actually concerns the interface of the video calling application. So I pointed out a few of like the more obvious UI design choices. You can kind of take a look. So it concerns the iconography. I don't know how to say that word. Tijmen, if you want to let us know in the chat. But the icons that you choose to represent certain buttons or certain actions, we wanted to be like as simplistic as possible, so it doesn't clutter everything else on the page, because there are a lot of moving parts. And then we let the actual interface colors be customizable based on like who's using it. We thought that'd be just like a cool touch. And then you can see how the gradients are carried over from our brand design over to our interface. Yeah, and then also fonts, very, very similar font to the one on this deck actually, but it was nice and modern and clean, nice to look at. And then, different animations, and yeah, so that's kind of how I would describe the interface design. And then we have the UX design, which, this is our version of the little flow chart that I showed you earlier. So all the way from logging into your account and like creating a room, down to, like going through the call, switching around huddles, going to your apps and using some stuff, and then logging out of the call. So I guess this kind of illustrates like the way that we had to think about the user flow and like how users interacted with our platform. So there's some questions that you had to ask, like for example, what are the different ways that you can move around to a different huddle, right? Originally we were thinking like, oh, we want to have it, maybe follow your mouse around, or you can like drag it or something. But then you have to think, in different modes of, how do I say this? Like different screens. So for example, on a tablet, the way that you want to move around is a little bit different than the way you want to move around on a desktop, right? And then another question is, this was very minor, but very important, like let's say you click on copy link, how do you show like a success message to ensure that the user understands that their action like successfully went through? It's a very minor thing, but like I said, but very, important in when the user is actually using it. It's just a nice touch to have. And then like what should the application do when you close a tab, or versus when you end the call or something. So like how to account for that kind of stuff. All of these are very good questions to ask when designing like the user experience, and the features, the design of them can be refined through user research and doing interviews. I know for us, we hopped on a few calls and like demoed it to people who would actually be using our product, and we asked them like, oh, pretend like you want to move to a different huddle, how would you do that? And kind of tracked where it was obvious what our platform was trying to get them to do, and where like they got hella confused and we just like couldn't do anything, or like our interface was confusing. So doing that kind of stuff is helpful to get insights on where your design has failures and strengths. And then lastly, this is more unrelated, but product design, a little bit more businessy, as they would say, but this is more broad, not super related to what we'd be doing with our clients. I think a lot of clients already come to us with a specific feature set that they know they want. But sorry, all good. But yeah, like I said, it kind of concerns, designing the product as a whole, right? So first identifying who are we building for? Who is our target audience, and what are their pains, right? So what problem are we trying to solve? And then what product features do we have to build and incorporate to solve these pains and, create some gains, as they say. So yeah, essentially it's traveling from problem to solution. And this also involves a lot of customer research prior to actually building out an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. And then it also involves a lot of interviewing and just doing deep dives into like what our user actually wants and what is like plaguing them with the current solutions. Product roadmaps, all these fancy buzzwords, just kind of planning out exactly what your product is going to entail. So yeah, so those are kind of like how I would describe as like the 4 tiers of design that we went through for this project. As you can see, they all like very closely tie in together. However, they all are very different disciplines and involve like a different type of thinking for each one. So yeah, hopefully that was a good illustration at least of how we split up design. Now on to Tijmen.
All right, cool. Before we move on, does anyone have any questions up to this point? Okay. Yeah, when you're creating a product, it's very important to keep in mind that your user is going to be coming to your website, your app, whatever, to do something. That can be logging in, making an account, getting some kind of information, using some kind of service. And as the designer, it is your job to ensure that this interaction goes smoothly, and that it is the most desirable for both the user and the sort of the product and the people behind the product. Because a better user experience will lead to a better product and more usage. So often that's phrased in the way that the designer is responsible for ensuring the smoothest, most attractive, exciting way for the user to accomplish their goal. And as a web designer, this often comes in the form of creating graphics and site elements. So when we're going to talk about tools like Figma, that's really how you get started with that. And that's where all this design framework thinking becomes concrete, and that's where you put it onto the page. And another thing that's very important as designers is that we have to be very diligent in our work and making sure that every choice is justifiable and that every choice has a purpose. And often that means that when you create your first draft of something, that you have to completely redo it. So many times I've like started on a project and I've like talked to whoever I'm working with or working for, and then they'll be like, this isn't quite what we want. And then I have to restart all over and try something else. And that's one of the more drastic examples, but often it also just involves this more tedious process of making changes and then getting feedback and then making more changes, getting more feedback. So I would really say that for web and app design, it's quite a marathon to really get a design up to perfection. And this design of mostly user flow and interaction often involves testing. And Vicky and I will talk about that in a few later lessons. But after all, you are designing for the user. So it's very often useful to get feedback and to present the user with something. Like Vicky was talking about in Huddle, where they presented it to the user and they said, how would you do this? And then if they notice that something is not immediately intuitive to the user, they would then change that feature and change the layout of the app to more effectively help the user complete that action. And then in a web dev context, the designer often works closely with the front-end developers to make sure that whatever they're designing, both graphically and in terms of interface and experience, making sure that that's feasible. And for more complex apps, that can be pretty tough. For example, we're working on a transport app, and there's a lot of different moving parts, and there's a lot of information that needs to be presented to the user at once. So a challenge was figuring out how to make the interaction smooth and how to make it easy for whoever is looking at these tables of like student information, how to most effectively convey that to the user, but also do it in a way where the developers could implement it in a reasonable time frame. Next slide.
Okay, so I guess some of you might be curious, possibly, what careers look like in design. So there's a few different types. There's obviously many more than what's listed on the screen, but these are often considered the most popular career options. So there's a graphic designer who creates visual elements. They work a lot with things like Illustrator, Photoshop to create graphics for a page or for a company in general. And then you have UI designers and UX designers. These are obvious because I already explained to you what these are. But UI designers design the interface, and then UX designers focus more on the user flow and feel. Then we have product designers who, like I said, design products as a whole. And then the funny term called the unicorn, which is this can be you. They can design as well as program. Very fun process to go through. But yeah, and then I'll hand it off to Tijmen, who will start to introduce us to some of the tools that people use to create designs.
All right, yeah. So as I said earlier, these tools really help you turn like this more abstract design framework into a reality. And often your choice in design tool really impacts what the final product is going to look like. So here we have 5 different tools lined up that are very common in the design industry. So from left to right, the first one is called Sketch, and it is a prototyping app that supports like more graphic design, but then also being able to turn those things into interactive components like buttons, sliders, whatever. And so the difference between Sketch and Figma, which is also a prototyping app that lets you do the basically exact same thing, is that Sketch, firstly, it's not an in-browser application, which Figma being in-browser is very convenient. And you also, it's not live sharing. So Figma is like Google Docs, except for design. So multiple people can be on the same document at once and make live edits, which is stellar for design work in teams. So yeah, you don't have that functionality in Sketch. Then there's Adobe XD, which is their own prototyping application. And again, this it's also like this graphic design application, but it doesn't have live sharing. So again, that puts Figma on top. Framer is also a prototyping application. It favors a little bit more towards the prototyping. So the button interactions and the sliders that you can make are a bit more fancy, although Figma has recently been implementing a lot of the features that we saw in Framer earlier. So those first 4 are really pure prototyping apps. And Vicky and I both agree that Figma is definitely, it definitely outranks the other 3 in terms of usability and collaboration. So then Illustrator is a little bit different because it doesn't focus on prototyping, and instead it has a few very powerful tools for illustrations. So the issue with Figma is that the in-browser capabilities prevent it from having a very complex pen tool. And the pen tool is really what makes Illustrator so powerful, and it lets you draw very complex shapes among a wide variety of other things that you can do in Illustrator. So next slide.
Okay, so now we have gotten to the fun part, is where we actually get to get our hands on some tools rather than hearing about our philosophical stuff. So yeah, we're gonna basically be going through a pretty brief Figma tutorial. We're actually gonna be holding a Figma workshop next week on Wednesday, I believe, with a guest lecture, and he'll go like much more in depth. But since we have limited time today, we will be going over the basics so you can be well prepared to do your homeworks and just get your hands on it. So, okay, there are a few steps here that we need to do to set up. So I'm gonna walk you guys through that. No, not that. Okay, okay, so I'm gonna go in incognito so that you guys can see me set up an account. But basically just please follow along with what I'm doing, just so you are on the same page. And if you ever need me to stop or slow down, then just let me know, because we want you guys to get as much information as possible. Okay, so we're on incognito now, so I'm not logged in anymore. So just go ahead and go to figma.com. And what you're gonna do here, we see this very, very nice landing page. I love their site, it's really cool. But yeah, so click sign up here. And the nice thing about Figma is that with a student email, you can actually get free Figma. It's really nice. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we use it so much, is because it has the perks. So just go ahead and click sign up with Google. And then just use your, wow, why do I have so many emails? Use your Berkeley email address to sign in. And then use your Calendar ID. I don't want to do this, but you get the idea. I'm just gonna give you guys like a minute to do this. It shouldn't take too long. Once you're done, just send it in the chat. Just say done or something so we know we can move on. Okay, I think we're good. We have one more person that has, I think Kimberly. Okay, sick. Nice, okay, nice, we all did it. Okay, so what you're gonna see when you get in is you're gonna see this, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly sure you see this screen. Let me know if this is not the case. Okay, so obviously I have a lot of stuff in here, but if it's your first time using it, it'll be very blank. And what you're gonna do to create a new project is, okay, actually, so basically this is where all your projects reside. You can search for stuff. This is where you want to probably be. It's recent stuff because it involves like your projects as well as the stuff that other people have shared with you. Community, don't really use it, but it's cool. And then drafts is where your personal projects lie. And then lastly, we have teams. You can create teams in Figma. So you can keep like all of your projects in one place, which is very helpful for dev projects and stuff. So would recommend looking into that.
Yeah, I do want to add, the community tab is really great for expanding your general knowledge in Figma. Because like if you imagine like working on anything, like you can always Google a specific question, but if you're looking to just make your design like toolkit bigger, looking at some of those articles is also fantastic.
Whoa, wait, this is cool. Okay. I've never explored this, but damn, this is pretty cool. Okay. So yeah, so what you guys are gonna do is you're gonna click in your drafts, you're gonna click this plus button, or it's up here too on the top right. Right here. Yeah, so let us do that. So once you click on the plus button, you will be transported into your first Figma project. So it'll be named Untitled first. Feel free to title it anything you want. You can say like hello world or something. I don't know. Okay, so I guess we'll first just walk through kind of what your space looks like and like where you can access different things. So to start, we can look at the nav bar. So on the very top left corner, we have the This is kind of like your top navbar on your Mac or on your Windows or something. Wait, actually Windows is on the bottom. I don't know. But this is where you can, let's see, like place stuff. You can save it, you can export stuff. Here, I don't really use this that much besides for file exporting. You can select different views. So, you know, these are rulers here. Sometimes these are just helpful for viewing certain things. You'll kind of see those as we go more in depth. And then some zoom preferences here. And then this is for specific objects, so it really only works when you have like selected an object. Not sure what this is. Text for text. Nice. All of this stuff is like accessible through shortcuts, so typically you won't have to go through this. Tijmen will talk about shortcuts when he actually gets to the beef of this workshop. Yeah, I've never actually really touched these, so Tijmen, jump in if you know what these are. But you know, we're just going basic today, so we'll talk about those later. Yeah, so then right next to it we have the cursor, which is, you know, it allows you to select stuff, so you can like drag stuff and just throw it around. And then scale for scaling things, scaling objects, so making them bigger or smaller. And then this is your frame and slice tools. So your frame is like the artboard kind of, which Tijmen will get into. So don't be confused what that is. And then slice allows you to make slices in your stuff, in your artboards and stuff. And then this is our shape builder. So you can make rectangles. This is most commonly used. It's kind of like a div actually, you know, like in the front end, it's like a div. It's just a box that holds stuff and has properties. And then besides that, we have different shapes like lines, arrows. We can make stars even. We can place images. So let's see, I probably won't place anything, but you know, we can take our workshop photo and then you just, oh, that is really big. You can just click and then there it is. And then here is our very basic kind of Illustrator ripoff. You have our pen tool. It works, you know, like it's good. It's just not, I feel like a lot of people use Illustrator, are more used to Illustrator's pen tool. At least I think it's like a little bit better. This one's just a little bit more confusing to use. You can use it for basic shapes, not a big deal. Typically it works out well enough, but you know, it's a little bit annoying sometimes. So typically we stick to Illustrator for that. And then pencil, draw things. Yeah. How do I, okay. And then here we have our text. So we can create text boxes and type stuff. This is to move around your space. So I think you guys have probably noticed by now, but you can scroll to move down or up, or you can use this move tool. And then another fun hack, if you want to zoom in, you can press Command or Control, depending on what you have, and then scroll up to zoom in, and then scroll down to zoom out. So that's just like a fast shortcut to navigation. And then this is for comments. Just like in code, we like to comment our code to show like, okay, this is what this thing does. Obviously, this is a little bit different. It's kind of like Google Docs comments, you know? Like if you see someone had used a bad color scheme, be like bad colors here, and then you can post it and roast them. And then you can resolve comments, and it's basically a Google Docs. Top right here is like the other controls. This will show basically who's on it. It's essentially Google Docs again. You can share stuff. And then this is where you actually run your prototype, which we'll show later. On the left here, we have this big white box. And basically what this box shows us is all the different elements on our page. So this can be a little bit confusing at first, but basically this is kind of like a file directory. So like, you know, sometimes you have folders that hold like your code and then different files. So pretty much like if you, let's say you put these two into a group, so you can right click and group these things, right? So notice here it collapses it into like this little folder here, and it has a drop down. And then inside here actually has a contents. So basically it's like a tree type structure where it's just holding your stuff in like certain directories, if it were analogous to files and stuff. So yeah, and then here you can also name stuff. So my first group, smiley face. Oh, that's a sad face. Okay. But yeah, so that's kind of how this navigation works. And you can select items here as well as just like straight up click on them on the sidebar if that's easier. And then here you can also make different pages. So for example, let's see, in our web dev, we have, we have our site landing page design. It's a really big file, so it's going to take a little bit. And then here in our sidebar, we have a bunch of different pages. Like the random is where I create all the birthday cake photos. So yeah, that's a fun fact. Anyway, so that's what pages are for, is just to keep everything organized. And then on the right here, we have properties panels. So when you click on an element, it gives you a certain set of properties you can change on the right-hand side. So let's say you want to make it move around. You can use this and just move it. Pretty straightforward. These are the XY coordinates. And then this is like the size of it. So you can make it skinny. You can make it very tall. And then this is the angle, border radius, very helpful in modern design, especially. You want to make things look all like smooth. And then we have blending modes. So when you overlay two things, you can change the way that they blend. Doesn't really apply here. I've never really used this too much, but it's helpful. And then you have fill. You can make it different colors. And then stroke essentially put something on the outside border. I'm gonna make this a big stroke, yeah. And then you notice you can change the colors of this too. Sorry. Here. And then effects. So we have various different types of effects. So right now the default is drop shadow always. I don't know, this is really big, so I'm just gonna get rid of it. Okay, so this will better illustrate to us what we're looking at. So when you want to like add a certain type of property, you press the plus button, and then to take it off, you press the subtract. So let's say I want this to have no fill. I'm just gonna subtract off the fill, and then I'm gonna add a stroke so we know it's still there. And then here we can add an effect onto it. So the default, like I said, is drop shadow. You can change the settings of the effect here. So example, I want to move it to the right more, move it down, change all this stuff. And then besides that, we have things like blurring. So you can blur the entire thing. This will basically blur the stuff behind this object if this object is transparent. And then inner shadow, I think only works if you have only stroke turned on, I think. It's just to put like a shadow inside of the object instead of outside. So those are like the default effects. And then this is where you actually export your project. Actually, no, where you export certain elements. So let's say I've made this really beautiful box that I want to be put on the website, right? And I want to hand it to a developer and say, hey, like put this in. So I would select this element, it's selected here, and then press export, the plus button next to it, select like the type of file that I'm using, and then just export it, and it'll just download it as an image in my Finder. Beautiful, it's so nice. But yeah, so that's kind of the basic properties. For stuff like text, of course, it's different. You have stuff like font, size, tracking, so like spacing between letters and all like the text specific stuff. So I would explore the properties for different types of objects. But yeah, so that's basically what your Figma does for you. I'm gonna hand it off to Tijmen now. He's actually gonna walk you guys through creating an app and actually getting your hands on the tools and building something. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Okay, cool. So hello, other Tijmen. Okay, so we're just going to get started with an empty canvas. Now, if I am going too fast, if I'm going too slow, please stop me. It's a little hard to do this without like being able to walk around and like look at people's screens. So yeah, feel free to interrupt me if you have any like questions or comments or concerns. All right, cool. So usually when you want to like make something new, you always want to start with a frame. So I'm a big fan of using shortcuts on my keyboard, just because it really helps you be much faster. And it also, like, if you don't have to move your mouse from the center of the screen to the top toolbar every time that you want to take an action, then it can go a lot faster. So actually, okay, actually that's not going to do anything. I was going to put the camera on my keyboard, but all right. So we're going to start off by hitting the F button, and the F button puts you into the frame menu. So you can either click and drag to make a new frame, or you can use one of the presets. So over here, you'll notice this pretty expansive menu. So let's just say that we want to start off creating our app in the iPhone 11 Pro Max. So yeah, I hit iPhone 11 Pro Max there. And it immediately just gave me a frame that's the proper dimensions. So yeah. Are we good with that? Does everyone understand? All right, cool. So next up, we're going to go to rectangle, or we're going to make a rectangle. So as you can see, there over here, it always tells you the shortcut letter. So as you start to get more comfortable with Figma, I would recommend trying to remember what the shortcut is for a thing before you actually do it, because it's going to help you like really get in tune with the Figma, so you can, you know, align your chakras. All right, so we're going to hit R for rectangle, and we're just going to draw this rectangle. So you'll notice that right now I can move it however I want. So the dimensions aren't constrained to each other, but I'm going to hold Shift, and that forces the dimensions to be proportional to each other. So now I can only make a square. So yeah, that's very useful, because then you don't have to like fiddle around. Right. So once we make our first square, let's just make it 90 by 90, and you can either use these numbers here, or over here in this control panel, you can say, okay, what if I want the width to be 92.5? Then you can type that number in, and it'll automatically do it for you, and you don't have to like deal with the clicking and dragging. But let's just keep it at 90 for now. So we're going to pick a nice color for this. I really like purple, so let's just do that. So yeah, once you have your color picked, you can edit the corners on this box. And recently, it has been trendy in design to not make your boxes super pointy. So we tend to make the corners of our boxes a little round sometimes. So what you can do is you can either zoom into the shape, and you can like click and drag on these points. And that'll just let you adjust the radius until you get a circle. So yeah, let's just put it at like 12. That's pretty nice. It doesn't have to be exact. And then once again, you can change that up here. So now I'm going to show one more like shape generation kind of shortcut. So we're going to hit R again for rectangle. And then now on my keyboard, I'm going to hold it's Command and Control on Mac, and Alt and it's Command and Shift on Mac, and Alt and Shift on Windows. That's right, Vicky, right?
I think so. You're the shortcut person.
Okay, cool. Because I'm doing this on my Windows right now, but
wait, sorry.
On Mac for a centered expansion, you hold Command and Shift, right?
I think so. I will check, actually.
All right, cool. So while Vicky checks that, we're gonna make another 90 by 90 box. And so you'll notice as I did that, my box, it was resizing anchored from center as opposed to one of the corners. So that can also be very useful in, in creating your boxes and shapes. So we want this box to be identical to the other one. So we could either do this whole FN. Okay, yeah. So on Mac you would hold FN. So we could either sort of start from scratch and make this again, or you could use copy and paste, right? And now I have two of the same shape. Or another great trick is to hold Alt or Control, and that will let you, that will automatically make it so that when you click and drag out, you are automatically duplicating the shape. So right now, while I'm dragging it, I'm holding Alt with my left hand and I'm dragging with my right hand. And that lets me duplicate the shape. And then I release the mouse before I release Alt. And I'm showing you guys this with all the shortcuts. But feel free to, when you're actually doing this, to take it slow and to do it in a different way. But I'm just showing you guys kind of what is possible when you get a bit more practiced. Cool. So let's say that we have this really cool idea for an app, and we want to make a super sick logo. And so the way that we're going to do our logo today is we're going to make it an intersection between two shapes. And so Figma has this cool tool. Illustrator has it too. And it's the shape joiner tool. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting both of these shapes. And then over here, you'll see these three different options appear. So this one is for components, but we're not going to get into that now. For right now, we're going to use this shape merger tool. So you'll see a few options here. You have union selection, subtract selection, intersect selection, exclude selection. These are all options, and I know that when I'm using these, I never know which one exactly to pick. So I'll usually pick the first one wrong, and then I'll have to like undo, which is Control or Command Z, and try it again. So, okay, let's say that we don't want to join the shapes because that's what we just did, like that. But we're going for this, oh wow, that's weird. Okay, so let's say we're going for this like Venn diagram look. So if you look at this, it's the exclude selection that makes the most sense. So now what it's done is it has taken the overlapping area and it's just turned it transparent. And now we have this complex shape that we just made out of two different shapes. And you can imagine that as you get more complex with this, you can create a lot more different things. The possibilities are limitless. Okay, cool. So we want our logo to be on the front and center of our page, right? So we're going to use these icons up in the top right corner to center our shape to the frame. So each of these, if you hover over it, it tells you what it is. But it's pretty intuitive. So if you hit this axis, it aligns it to the vertical axis, and that aligns it to the horizontal axis. So we've now perfectly centered our logo. So now we want to give our app a name. So let's just say that this is the home page for our app. So we're gonna use the text tool. So you can either click it or you can hit T, and then you can just start typing. So let's just call it super cool app. Cool. So our text block isn't exactly what we want. So we can resize it like this by just clicking and dragging. And then over here in the options, there's a few ways to align the text. So we want to center align it because it looks nice in this case. Yeah, and then let's just say that when you open the app, you get this, and then you want to have a button that directs the user to the next page. So we're going to hit R again to make a rectangle. And for this one, we're just going to click and drag it. Doesn't have to be super fancy. I'm just going to do that. We're going to adjust the radius a little bit. And then what I just did is I hit the I button. I think it's something different on Mac. Yeah, but we can get into that later. It's also should be under. Actually, really, it's I on Mac too. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I feel like first like the letter stuff typically stays the same, but it's like the Command Alt FN option stuff that kind of changes. So like
I see.
if it's a single letter, typically it's the same.
Okay, cool. So let's align this to the center as well. We don't want it to be super in the middle, so we're just gonna drag it down. So you'll notice that there is this snap line that Figma gives you. And I would say that the snap line technology that Figma has is probably the best I've seen in any graphic design app. I would say that even Illustrator doesn't compare to how smart the snapping line system is in Figma. And then also cool hack, if you hold shift while you're dragging, it only allows you to do it horizontally or vertically. Which is super useful if you're just trying to move it up and down. Right, so we're putting that button there. We're going to hit T again because we want to tell the user to click. Okay, click. Cool. So then we're going to decrease the font size a little bit. That's over here. And I'm just going to put that there and see how it automatically snaps to the center. And just because it's good etiquette, we're going to group this button. So I'm going to hit Control G, which is Command G on Mac. And that'll put it in a group. Now, you'll notice that as Vicky was illustrating earlier, that creates this tree item here, where you have a group that contains both of these items. So now if I select one of these items, it'll select all of them, which is really useful when you're working with more complex shapes. So now let's just say that we want to make this this text white. So then you just, if you click once on the group, it selects the whole thing. But if you click, if you double click on an item within the group, it'll select that. Cool. So then we're almost done. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make another page so that you guys can also test out the prototyping feature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my entire frame, and I'm going to hold Alt or F, was it FN? Option. Anyways, there should be a button on Mac that lets you, where if you hold it, you get that little second arrow. And that'll let you copy it over. So right now I'm holding Alt and Shift. Thanks, Vicky. And that will let me copy it over. And so again, there's multiple different ways to get another frame. But this is just a quick and easy way. We didn't even have to move our mouse back over to this menu. We just put it over here again. So now we're like more into the content of the app itself. So, but we still want people to know they're in our super cool app. So let's just make the text a little smaller. We can put that up in the corner. And then if you use these different buttons, it lets you, using these will change the way that the box snaps to the edges. So that helps you align things. And then let's just say we want to display an image. So what you can do is you can either go to Google Images and you could look up like cute puppy. We can go to images. I like this one. So then you can right click and you can hit copy image. And then in Figma, you can hit Control or Command V to paste. And then you can resize it and put it over here. Another thing you can do is if you have a file on your computer that you want to put in, you can go to File, Place Image, and that's Control-Shift-K if you want to be a pro. So then you can import this image. I like coral reefs. Yeah, let's just put that one on here. Yeah, and then I'm going to hand it back to Vicky to teach you guys about prototyping. And then, yeah.
Nice. Thanks, Tijmen.
Yeah, Vicky, I shared this thing with you on Figma.
Which thing? Oh, the thing.
The thing, in fact.
Yes, okay. Let me take a look. It seems I am having trouble finding it. I think it was in my mail. Give me one second. I need to clean out my inbox. I've been exposed by myself. Oh, here we go. Okay. There. All right, perfect. I was wondering what this was earlier, and then I remembered. Okay. Anyway, so, all right, let's talk about prototyping. So basically, prototyping allows you to make things flow in the way you want them to. So we have a tab here called prototype. It's right next to design in our right navigation bar or navigation panel. So if you click on it, it'll give us some guidelines, I guess. So the main way that you use this is to navigate users between different pages. So for example, actually, let me pull up this as an example. The way that we got our, we like to do our decks on Figma now because you can prototype the slides to move in a way that you want. So for example, here you notice that this frame, when you click anywhere on this frame, there's a connection between this and the next frame. And then once you make these connections, you can kind of change, here it says on click, right? While hovering, obviously wouldn't make sense in this context, but let's say you want a button to change colors when you hover over it. So you can do that. Yeah, just a bunch of different options, and then navigate to, open, overlay, all this stuff, different ways that it shows up, and then the page that you want to navigate to. So for example, this one, we want to go from cover to agenda. And then you can change the animations actually. So the type of animation, also type of animation, the time it takes, and more fancy stuff. Yeah, so then here, let's say, okay, so I have this button here, this very ominous button called click, which is actually a group. But basically, if we click on this component, we see that this little circle plus button shows up. And I assume what Tijmen wanted to do is when you click, it goes onto here. So you're just going to take this button, start dragging it, and then it'll create like this arrow, right? And then it kind of goes wherever you want it to go. So in this case, I want it to go to the next page. So then to actually run this prototype, what you do is here we have a present button. It's the arrow on the top right. And then we see a nice little demonstration pretty much. And notice when we click here, we set up the prototype so that it goes to the next page. So when you click on this button, it should take us to the next one. I think this is not in the frame. So let's put this back. And there it is. Okay. Yeah, so that's just like a very simple prototype. Obviously, you can do a lot more complex things. But I would recommend you kind of just go through and explore the different capabilities that Figma has. I think they've recently beefed up their prototyping capabilities. So I'm not super familiar with all of them, but I would go and just explore, dig around. Yeah, so that's prototyping. basic prototyping. Obviously, like I said, you can do a lot more. So then next we're gonna just talk briefly about importing elements. So you can import, oh, I have this great website called Blob Maker, I think. Yeah. And you can just make blobs. I don't know, I find this very amusing. And then you can download it as an SVG. And with this kind of stuff, you can drag it straight into Figma. And then it, since it's an SVG, it allows you to make edits on it. So you can actually go in and change the shape again. Unlike a photo, like I obviously can't change anything about this doc here. So yeah, that's pretty helpful. You can also just like, let's say I want an image, I can just straight up right click, copy, and do that too. Oh, that's unfortunate, but yeah, that's also an option. So yeah, that's basic importing. Next, we have good practice, and this is actually the last section of the workshop. Essentially, let's see. There's a few different things that you should follow when you're designing to make it easier for yourself when you go back to your project, and also just to make it easier for developers who might be looking off of your prototype. So we'll go over 4. We'll start with components. So there's this cool thing in Figma called components. It's, like React components, same idea, but a little bit different. So let's say I make this really spicy navbar. Let's make it round and modern. I want it to be web dev colors. And then, actually, no, not a navbar. Let's pretend this is a button. Let's see. Yeah, so we've made a button here, looking oddly similar to Tijmen's. We have similar button creating mentalities, it seems. I'm gonna group it, and we're gonna make this white. So let's say I have this one button style that I kind of want to keep, right? But instead of like having to paste it over and change like or having to like recreate the styling of this button, what we can do is that we can actually change this into a component. So if you right click on it and then you press create component, it'll turn it purple. So notice on the left-hand side on this object tree, we have a purple element now, and purple just stands for component. So with components, basically what happens is that, let's say you want to put this button on multiple pages, right? When you change the master component, so this diamond thingy right here means that it's a master component, and everything that has the empty diamond is like kind of a follower, or like it kind of follows exactly what changes you make on the master. So for example, in this button, I want to move the text, hold on. Sorry, wait, where's the master? Okay, so in the master, I want to move the text down relative to the button itself. Notice that when I change the master component, it actually changes everything else. So this is just nice because sometimes, let's say you have a navbar on every single page on your Figma, and you want to make like one tiny tweak in the navbar, but you don't want to have to do it like 70 times, right, for every page that you've built. So basically what components allows you to do is that, let's say I just want to make this text like a little bit smaller, right, but I don't want to do it 3 times. I just have to do it once, and then the rest of the components will kind of follow after that. If you want to detach a component, you just right click on it and then press detach instance. And then it'll just take it back to a normal element, and it won't end up being affected by anything that happens. So yeah, that's components. It's a similar, thought process as like React components, or like when you're coding, creating one thing that will end up being able to make a lot of changes everywhere else, so you don't have to do redundant work. So yeah. Cool. So next we have naming. So naming is essentially just what shows up like right here. So for example, this button is called group 2. Just like in our files. So for example, let's say you create a button component in your React for some reason, or it's any component really. You wouldn't name it like cilantro, you know, unless it had to do with cilantros. You would probably name it something descriptive so that it fits kind of what you'd expect it to do. So this is not only helpful for you, but also when you have someone else having eyes on your projects, trying to navigate through your project structure, it's really easy to point out to them like, oh, this is something I need help with. Take a look at this specific component, stuff like that. And it's nice for developers too, because we want to be able to make the process as fast and as, you know, intuitive as possible. So the way that you change the names of elements is, so let's go back to this. Right now, Super Cool App just has the title Super Cool App, obviously, but we can actually change the name of this component without changing the text inside of it. So here we have, I'm sorry, someone's knocking at my door right now. Tijmen, do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah. Let me just get back on track. Yeah, so if you rename the item, I'm pretty sure. Okay. Sorry, I did not prepare for this, but okay. So you can actually rename the text groups without changing the text itself. So that's really useful for when you're designing for your devs to start converting it into code. You always want to make sure that your naming is very descriptive and very intuitive for someone who is trying to turn all of these Figma items into something that can be responsive and something that exists on a web page. Go ahead, Vicky.
Okay, sorry, I'm back. Okay, so like Tijmen said, you can change the titles of stuff, so including text. Let's say I want this to be called title. So you can just name it title without actually changing what's inside of here. And then for this, we'd want to call it logo probably, right? So we name it logo. And then here, let's say this says like login, right? Something a little bit more, you know, relevant. We'd probably want to call this something like login button. Just so, you know, it's very logical what this does. Yeah, so naming stuff basically just allows, you know, clarity of like navigation through a project structure. And it's really helpful just in all cases for everyone who may be interacting with your project. So yeah, next we have creating styles. So essentially styles are a certain subset of properties that exist in like this right panel here that you can kind of take and apply to stuff over and over again. So let's say I have this, so let's say I want to add a drop shadow on this button that's like very specific, right? So I'm gonna, let me first detach this because I don't really want this to be the case. So I have this button here and then I'm gonna add an effect onto it. And let's say I want this drop shadow to be like red for some reason, pink. And then I want to like blur it more. And oh, that actually looks kind of cool, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, let's say we want it to look like this. And then I also want all of the rest of these buttons to look like this too. Of course, we can use components for that. This is kind of a dumb example. But instead of going through each button and having to, you know, copy over the hex code and then copy over the blur radius and everything, we can take this drop shadow and then, wait, hold on. Why do I not know how to do this? Okay, so actually we can, okay, so there's this little die looking thing here. Right next to the plus button. If you press add, you're gonna be able to create a new effect style. So I'm gonna call it like pink neon because that's what it looks like. And then from here is where we can actually edit like what it looks like, right? So now when I go to this button, I can go back to my effects, edit, and then just select it, and we don't have to like copy in the properties again. So this applies not only to drop shadows, it also applies to, let's say, saving certain colors. Let's say you have a website that only employs like 4 different colors. You can just add it here. And then you don't have to go back and like look for the hex codes and stuff. And yeah, no, all of these properties pretty much have style guidelines that you can create. So feel free to use those. It will streamline your process a lot and make everything a little bit faster. Yeah, and then lastly, grouping. We briefly went over this, but basically grouping allows you to put stuff together in like a logical way. For example, like this button, there's no case where I'd want the text to like be off of the button or something, or like really far away. So I'm just going to take it and put it in the same group so that it always sticks together. This also kind of relates to the way that, you know, in front end, when you're creating like HTML divs or elements, you're basically putting stuff in a package. You're like, you have this one parent div that has like all the rest of these elements inside of it. So for example, you know, let's say all this was like inside of this box, right? So this in HTML would be the div, and then it would kind of have children, just a bunch of button children inside of it as shown here. So yeah, that's kind of just useful for developers too, to kind of visualize the way that everything is like packed together and like the hierarchy of the elements on your page. So yeah, yeah, that's basically all for good practice. Yeah. Okay, sorry. All right, so that's actually all for Figma workshop time, and feel free to hop in if there's anything you feel like I missed on those last parts. But yeah.
No, that was good.
Okay, sick. Sorry for the interruptions also. It seems to be a very busy night for some reason, but that is fine. We work through it. Sick. Okay, so now that we're done with this, does anyone have any questions? We will be available to stick around a little bit after if you guys want some one-on-one help, but if you have questions, feel free to drop them now, or else we'll just move on to the homework introduction and then we'll be done for today. We only have a minute. Okay. Cool. All right, so your homework is very fun today. It shouldn't take you too long, and if it does, you know, of course, let us know. But yeah, so basically we have this website. We have a project spec for this in our actual Notion, like where you actually see our stuff. Let's see. Let me navigate to our Notion. Education. Okay, so in our UI UX 1 lesson plan, at the very bottom, we have our homework spec. So basically we have this website here that I really love. It's really pretty. I don't know, I just like it. And what your job is to do for the homework is to basically recreate this front page. This is mentioned in the spec, but I just want to make sure you guys don't have to actually recreate these photos. That would probably take a long time, but if you want to, something you can try. You know, we haven't really taught you the tools to be able to do it, but if you want to like delve into Illustrator, like basic shape building and stuff, like feel free to try. And yeah, so basically you're gonna build this, and then we have this button here called Talk to Us. And basically when you click on this button, it should take you to this page, and you just have to make a few rectangles. Any of these photos, feel free to take off of the page. Obviously you don't have to like find your own photos, but just try to mimic the design of this as well as possible. Yeah, so it's a pretty cool website, so I don't know, it might be fun. But yeah, so that's your homework. Feel free to let us know if you have questions, as always. And we'll be holding office hours too this week, so if you're confused on any of the tools and like functionalities, then make sure to drop in and ask. We're always here to help. So yeah, that's all for today. Tijmen, do you have any closing words?
Thanks for coming, guys.
Nice. Yeah, so feel free, like I said, to stick around and ask us questions, but you're free to go. Nice.
How did you make that glowy thingy over the button again?
Oh yes, okay. Yes. Have a great night, everyone. Okay, so the glow is kind of mimicked by the drop shadow. So basically, you have this box. Let's say you want it to have like a neon blue glow. So you're basically gonna go into your effects on the right hand side. You're gonna press plus, and then the drop shadow is typically not used for this, but it can be like manipulated to look like a neon glow. So what I did is I just changed the color. So if you click on like the drop shadow properties, you can change the color of stuff, and then select the color that you want. And then to make it neon instead of a shadow, you just want to center it so that there's like no offset, and then increase the blur, and then increase like the intensity to make it look more, yeah. So that's how you do that. Does that make sense?
What is the center thing you were talking about?
Oh yeah. So basically the drop shadow is like this blob that hides like behind your element. So the X is basically the X offset. So when I increase the X, it's gonna move to the right. Notice. And then if
I see.
Y,
It's a okay.
so if you set those to 0, it centers it behind it. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty good.
Okay, it's just us. Sick.
Yeah. Good shit.
There's just so many interruptions. Like I don't know why. Like that shit just throws me off.
Yeah. Wait, who was at the door?
It was kind of friend.
Oh.
I don't even know she knew he was coming over, but I was like, bruh, like I just need a fucking hour and a half. I swear.
Yeah.
Like,
Holy shit, I'm so tired. That was good though.
yeah, I get
Like-
so distracted, like so distracted.
Yo, no, you
Literally
did great.
just sounds like fucking throw me off my fucking.
Off your rocker.
Yeah,
Racing off my
fucking
rocker.
chakra-
It misaligns my
I'm
chakras.
so- I still
Yeah.
I still have 170 to finish.
Oh shit.
It's due in an hour, so I'm actually gonna.
Yeah, good luck.
If you want to, we can hop on a call to debrief after I finish, which shouldn't take too long. But
I mean, yeah, or we can talk about it more when we do next lesson plan.
yeah.
Yeah, and I guess we can meet. We can just do that when we all come over on Wednesday night.
Oh yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I'm so excited.
I know. I'm so excited too.
Yeah.
I'm so excited so.
Okay.
Oh shit,
good,
am I
that's
still
your homework.
recording? That's so awkward.
Huh?
I'm still recording.
Okay. Hi, recording.